Hello, my name is David Cornell, and today I'm going to show you what is included in Ubuntu Pro. So you may be asking yourself, alright, I deployed Ubuntu Pro, what now? Well, if that's the case, or if you're just curious about what Ubuntu Pro is, you came to the right place. In this video, we'll do a deep dive on the security and compliance features available in Ubuntu Pro, such as FIPS, CIS, open source security, 10-year lifetime, and Lifepatch. But before we do that, let's take a quick look at what Ubuntu Pro is. One important thing to know is that Ubuntu Pro is just like the classic Ubuntu LTS you know and love, but with added security features on top of it. Whatever workload you had running on Ubuntu LTS, you'll be able to run on Ubuntu Pro. Ubuntu Pro is perfect for users that want to have FIPS compliance or CIS hardening, or even for those who just want to get a few more years of security updates on their Ubuntu 16.04 instances that entered its extended security maintenance period in May 2021. Alright, so with that said, let's dive right into it. At the time of this recording, Ubuntu Pro is available on Azure, AWS, as well as on Google Cloud. For this demo, I'm going to launch Ubuntu Pro 18.04 in Azure. So in Azure, I'm going to go to the marketplace and I'll look for Ubuntu Pro here. And I can see that I can spin up Ubuntu Pro 14.04, 18.04, 16.04, 20.04, and there are other flavors of Ubuntu Pro like the FIPS version that has FIPS enabled out of the box. There's many different possibilities of Ubuntu Pro flavor, but for this demo, we'll use the Ubuntu Pro 18.04 LTS right here. So we see in the marketplace of Azure that Ubuntu Pro 18.04 LTS has the features that we mentioned earlier, such as FIPS and CIS, and the 10-year lifetime support. And we have a pricing description here. One thing to understand about Pro is that the pricing is metered, just like you are used to have in the public cloud. So there's no contract required for getting started with Ubuntu Pro with Canonical. You can just spin up Ubuntu Pro on the public cloud and start using the security features that come with it, and just get priced for what you use, just like you're used to in the cloud. So you would go ahead and create the virtual machine by using Ubuntu Pro. I already have one spun up, so we'll go to that and we'll start our deep dive right there. After SSHing to my Ubuntu Pro 18.04 instance, I'll be greeted with this classic welcome screen. The first command I want to run is UA status, like this. If you're following along on your end, note that there is you need at least version 26.2 or 27 and up to be able to follow along the same way that I'm doing during this demo. If you run UA version on your Ubuntu Pro instance and you find that you have a version that's older than 26.2, I recommend doing a sudo apt update followed by a sudo apt install Ubuntu Advantage tools to get the latest version of the Ubuntu Advantage client. Once you have a recent version of the UA client, you can do UA status, and we'll go over these features one by one and see what it means and how we can actually use these features. One important flag is the -- all flag like this. This lets you see the features that are still considered beta, such as the CIS feature right here. So you need to do this, the -- all, to see the service, and to enable the beta services, you need to add the -- beta to them. We'll cover that later. All right, so the first service I want to take a look at is the FIPS service. As we've seen in the marketplace, there's also an Ubuntu Pro FIPS image that already has FIPS enabled out of the box. So if that works for your use case and you just want to use that, you can go ahead and launch the Ubuntu Pro FIPS, and that certainly will work well for you. But here I'm going to show you how you can enable FIPS inside the Ubuntu Pro instance. You'll notice that there are two lines that talk about FIPS here. The FIPS one right here is the certified FIPS modules and kernel by that was certified by NIST. So if you need to be running the official certified modules and you cannot have anything that diverges from the official certified modules, you'll want to use the FIPS feature. We also have FIPS updates right here. This one is basically the same base as the FIPS feature, but it just has security updates on top of them. The reason why we do it like that is because some users will require to be running the official certified FIPS modules from NIST, and in that case they'll run the FIPS one here. But sometimes you may not absolutely require the NIST certification. You just want to be running FIPS. FIPS compliant modules and kernel, and you are interested in getting security updates that would otherwise void the NIST certification. So if you want FIPS but you don't need to be absolutely certified and you want to have security updates, then you'll want to run the FIPS updates one right here. This is the one I'll use for this demo. So if you want to enable that, you just type sudo ua enable FIPS updates like this. And I'm prompted that, like I just explained, this using FIPS updates, my system will not be FIPS certified, but it will include security and bug fixes. So I say yes, I'm sure that's what I want to do. And it says that FIPS updates cannot be enabled with Lifepatch because the Lifepatch feature doesn't cover the FIPS kernels. So it's just asking me if I want to disable Lifepatch and proceed. So I'll say yes to that as well. And then the UA client will just go ahead and install the required FIPS kernel and FIPS packages to make my system FIPS compliant. So we'll just let that finish. The installation completed. I'm getting a message that a reboot is required to complete the FIPS installation. So I'll go ahead and reboot this instance. The instance has finished rebooting, so I can SSH back into it. If I look at the UA status again, I can see that FIPS updates is now enabled on this instance. And if I do a uname-a, I will see that the kernel is now an Azure FIPS kernel. As compared to before, we would only have seen the Azure optimized kernel here. Now we have the Azure FIPS, the Azure optimized, but with FIPS on top of it, like this. And the one command that you can run to see if FIPS is really running on the kernel currently in this instance is you can do a cat of the proxys crypto FIPS enabled. And if this returns a 1, then it means that the FIPS mode is enabled on this system. So from there, it's up to you to design your applications or your web apps or web services, or any kind of software that you need to run with FIPS enabled. You can use the FIPS packages. So if I do a dpkg and I grep for FIPS, I'll make that a little bit smaller. I can see that there's a whole bunch of packages that were installed with the FIPS enablement here. One of them being the OpenSSL package here. So now if my applications use the OpenSSL library, they will get the Ubuntu, the FIPS version of that. And same thing for OpenSSH client and server and other packages. So it's now up to the developers or the administrators of this instance to use these libraries and these packages inside their applications. So we covered FIPS. The next one I want to take a look at is CIS here. So it says for companies looking to leverage industry benchmarks for hardening, Ubuntu Pro makes leading profiles available. So we have this CIS profile. So if we look at the UA status output again, I need to specify --all to see the CIS here. And so if I do sudo UA enable CIS, I need to specify beta because it's still a feature that's in beta. If I do this, it will install the CIS packages that I need to use the hardening tools and auditing tools for CIS from Canonical. So again, this doesn't actually harden the instance. This just gives you the tools you need to do that. So what I mean by that is that if you do a dpkg of the packages and you grep for USG, you'll see the that you have the common files as well as the SCAP contents for the CIS Ubuntu benchmarks, which include the tools needed for the CIS hardening and audit. So to enable CIS, to run the CIS hardening script on your instance, you'll want to follow the Ubuntu Security Certifications documentation, which talks about the hardening as well as the auditing. The TLDR for that is that you need to run the hardening script in the user share Ubuntu SCAP security guides CIS hardening directory. There is a script there that's called Canonical Ubuntu 1804 or 1604 or 2004 CIS harden, and then you need to specify the level between level 1, level 2, and server or workstation profile. So for this demo, we'll do the level 1 server hardening. And when you do this, this is actually doing changes to your system. So the script is actually going through the rules and is enforcing them on this machine, making changes to this instance. What you normally would want to do with this tool is probably harden one instance of your Ubuntu Pro. Of Ubuntu Pro, and maybe do a golden image with something like Packer or Azure Image Builder or something like that, and then that golden image would be shared to your users in your organization, and so therefore you wouldn't have to re-harden your image every time you spin a new instance. Since this script makes changes to your environment, to your instance, I recommend running this in a lab environment if possible first, or at least take a snapshot of your instance where you run this, because these rules sometimes can have unpredictable effects on your applications and services, and also you may have to customize some of these rules to fit your environment better. All right, so the CIS level 1 server profile hardening completed, and now I can run an audit if I want to see the CIS score of my instance. So I can run a CIS audit level 1 server. And once that audit scan completed, it'll say that the scan results are available as a HTML report, which you can download to your machine. And the report looks like this, and you will see the number of pass and fail tests on the system, and you'll get a score. And if you want to know the details, you can filter out the pass tests and just keep the failed ones, and you'll see here which ones have failed. And if you want, you can customize these rules, and you can have an even higher score by doing customizations that fit your environment even more. The next feature we'll look at in Ubuntu Pro is the open source security here. The website says Ubuntu Pro adds security coverage for the most important open source applications like Apache Kafka, Nginx, MongoDB, Redis, and PostgreSQL. This corresponds to the ESM apps line that we have here in UA status. If you do a sudo apt update to update your apt package information database, you'll notice the usual Azure here. Because I'm on Azure, we see the Azure mirrors of the Ubuntu archive for 1804. We also have the security repository from Ubuntu. And there are 4 more lines here, which are actually just 2 more repositories, 2 lines for each extra repository. And the open source security mentioned in Ubuntu Pro corresponds to these 2 lines that we see here in apt update. So this here is an extra repository that contains security updates that are only available for Ubuntu Pro users or Ubuntu Advantage for applications customers. These are updates that affect packages mainly in the universe repository. So if I do app cache policy of Kafka, for example, I can see that Kafka is only available inside the ESM apps repository. This means that Kafka is not traditionally available in the Ubuntu archive. And so packages like this or others will be included only in this ESM apps repository. This is all we'll cover for now for ESM apps and the open source security offering. The next one I want to deep dive on is the 10-year lifetime here. So it says that Canonical backs Ubuntu Pro for 10 years with an asterisk. The asterisk means for 1804 onwards. The maintenance period for Ubuntu Pro 1404 and 1604 is 8 years. So 1804 and 2004 LTS of Pro will be covered for 10 years. If we go to the Ubuntu Lifecycle webpage, we can see here that Ubuntu has a release cadence that is very consistent. So you get a LTS release of Ubuntu every 2 years, and if you're not aware already, the numbering scheme is the year and then the month. So 1404 means a release of Ubuntu that was a LTS release in April 2014. 1604 is April 2016, 1804 is April 2018, and so on. And there is also an interim release of Ubuntu every 6 months, and those interim releases are only supported by Canonical for 9 months. And this is what this graph shows you. So if you run 2004 or 1804, you can see that the orange window here, including the light orange and the dark orange, is 5 years. And this is the time that you will get security updates and bug fixes for the normal LTS release. But when you get Ubuntu Pro, you get ESM included out of the box with Ubuntu Pro, so you get security updates for another 5 years, bringing the total for Ubuntu 1804 and up to 10 years. So this means that if you start a project today on Ubuntu 2004, you'll be covered until 2030 with security updates, which should give you enough time to do your projects and migrate them down the line and so on. So when you use Ubuntu Pro, you know that Canonical will back you, and you will have the security updates for those total of 10 years. You can see that from the UA status output. This is the ESM Infra line that you see here, and you can see that in action also when you do a sudo apt update. We already covered the apps, and so the infra lines that you see here are the lines that correspond to ESM Infra. So the day that Ubuntu 1804, in this example, will go into its extended security maintenance period, this would be in April 2023. Then the security updates for Ubuntu 1804 will stop showing up in your regular Ubuntu archive and will only show up in the ESM Infra repository here. And finally, the last feature that I want to cover is the kernel Lifepatch feature here. The website says Ubuntu kernel updates are regularly issued. With our Lifepatch service, kernel patches are delivered immediately without the need to reboot your VMs. So this one you can see here in the Lifepatch line here. And the way to see that in action is to run the Canonical Lifepatch status command. And we can see the output says that it succeeded, but there were no life patches needed for this kernel yet. The reason for that is that because I'm running a recent image of Ubuntu Pro, it came with a very recent kernel, and there are no life patches available for this kernel. So what I'll do is I will on purpose downgrade this kernel to a lower version, and then I'll be able to do a better demo of what this looks like on an older kernel version. So on a machine that has the kernel downgraded to an older version of the kernel, that in this case about a year ago, if you run the canonical lifepatch status command, you'll see that it's succeeded as well, and that all applicable lifepatch modules have been inserted. So now the next thing you can do is do a canonical lifepatch status, and you can specify the YAML format like this. And then you can see that for this kernel, the patches that were applied is actually fixes these CVEs that you see there. And so this is how Lifepatch can protect you against those CVEs into a running system and a running kernel. And doing this will prevent you from having to reboot your servers to apply those kernel updates, and gives you much more flexibility as to when you want to apply your regular patch runs to your classic packages and kernels on the system. So that's it for this demo. Hopefully this covered the essentials on the features that make up Ubuntu Pro. As I said earlier, Ubuntu Pro is available on Azure, AWS, and on Google Cloud as well. And it comes with Lifepatch and ESM extended security maintenance enabled out of the box, with extra security features that you can enable with just one command. Thank you very much for watching, and have a great day.